Rachel Flores was the general manager of a Burger King in Lincoln, Nebraska. When the air conditioning in the kitchen stopped working, Rachel and her team didn't quit. They doubled down, serving up burgers during the pandemic, even shorthanded. While the grills got so hot, the air became thick and oily. Breathing in the kitchen was difficult. The team sweated through their polyester uniforms every day. The heat eventually got so bad that Rachel ended up in the hospital for dehydration, which means an IV of fluids and, of course, a big, fat hospital bill. When she tried confronting her boss about the AC on behalf of her team, telling them the kitchen was over 90 degrees and had been for weeks, they told Rachel Flores she was being a baby. So she quit. Rachel Flores politely put in her 2-week notice. But here's where you might have seen this story surface in the news. So did the rest of her team, all at once. The entire staff of Burger King quit and walked off the job. And they took the time on their way out to change the Burger King sign, where the big white letters under the logo proclaimed 11 million served every day. It now said, "We all quit. Sorry for the inconvenience." Rachel Flores and her whole team gave up their $25K a year jobs to join the legions of unemployed currently waiting out the pandemic. But the Burger King in Lincoln, Nebraska isn't alone. In North Carolina, a congressman tweeted a picture he took outside at a Hardees, where the staff also quit en masse. The poster in the Hardees window said, "Due to no staff, we are closed." Republican Congressman David Reuser blamed the COVID stimulus, tweeting, quote, "This is what happens when you extend unemployment benefits too long." The wages at the North Carolina Hardees, by the way, is about $9.18 an hour. In Wadesboro, a poster went up in Wendys' window saying, "We all quit, closed." The average hourly wage for a Wendys worker is $9. A sign on a Chipotle door went viral last week, which said, quote, "Ask our corporate offices why their employees are forced to work in borderline sweatshop conditions for 8+ hours without breaks. We are overworked, understaffed, underpaid, and underappreciated." The average wage for a Chipotle worker is $11.82 an hour. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet and get to the facts.
Low-wage jobs have become a battlefield this month. Fast food restaurants have started advertising their hourly rates on the sides of buildings in bold, hoping to entice workers to come in for a job interview. And Amazon has started offering $1,000 sign-on bonuses for new hirees. And still, people aren't coming back to work. So where the hell are all our laborers? There are a lot of rumors and myths flying around online. So we're here to bust a few of those myths. Myth 1. In America, we keep losing manufacturing jobs, which has been the seat and all 3 legs of the middle-class stool since World War II. So where the hell did these factory jobs go? And why is everyone working at Burger King or Amazon nowadays? Myth 2. According to Fox News, the COVID stimulus killed jobs, period. If you pay people to sit on the couch all day during a pandemic, they'll want to stay there. So, if we cut off these poor people's relief funds, we'll be doing them a favor by starving them out of the house, right? Myth 3. So, if the stimulus is already over and it didn't actually cause a mass laziness, then why aren't people going back to work? With everyone hiring, it should be a job frenzy, not a quitting spree. We'll talk about the war being waged by actual economists. But first, I want to talk to Joe about how these millennials are just lazy whiners who lack a little something we used to call work ethic.
So if you've seen Simon Sinek on YouTube, he kind of bashes on millennials a lot. This isn't, by the way, this whole episode is not a millennial issue. It's more of a labor issue.
That old saying, these kids nowadays.
Right. Yeah, these McDonald's and Burger King working kids, they aren't the same ones we had flipping burgers 40 years ago.
I think it's always funny that the millennial Simon Sinek type, our parents and my friends talk about how lazy kids are nowadays, like they invented laziness.
Right.
We had just as many lazy people in my day. I promise. We invented it.
Right. I'm gonna argue in favor of laziness. Honestly, the whole history of the human race is finding the most efficient way to do things. I mean, there's a reason we went from mops to Roombas. Is the more we free ourselves up to do intellectual pursuits, the better off we are as humans. So why wouldn't you want to get away from a grill at Burger King and move into clerical work of some sort?
And to put this in context, when I entered the job market as after high school, it was about 1993, 1994. A lot of my friends started to work in the construction business, and they started as flaggers. When you're driving your car and they wave you around.
Right. That
job, starting in 1993, 1994, paid about $15 to $17 an hour. That was a starting wage.
Okay.
Guess what the wage of that starting job is now?
I'm gonna show myself to be kind of a rube. Is it the same?
It's exactly the same. Now, apartments don't cost $700 anymore. They cost $1,500, and everything's gone up except I pay for that job, which is actually a dangerous job because you get hit by fucking cars all the time.
Right. That's going to be something that if anyone looks up, we've done this exercise before. If you look up the rate of rent versus the rate of pay has not gone up since the 90s. Rent has kept climbing. There's an article we're going to reference, and we did in Classism, one of our other episodes, basically all about why wages have not gone up in America in the last 30 years. And it just comes down to discomfort and fear. So we will definitely get to that in this episode. But our first real point we want to get to is Congressman Reuser. Is it possible that all of these people are complainers? We have an entire generation of lazy people, not people that had cheap education like the boomers or decent housing like the generation before the boomers. What if it is just an entire generation that is lazy like Reuser and Sinek seem to think?
And this $400 stimulus money a week turn them into lottery winners.
300, yeah. 300
They've never had it better, and they're driving Bentleys and smoking weed. It's great times.
I would love to do the adjusted math on how much technically everybody from their generation was getting paid just by having a really good economy and all these like low cost things like healthcare, housing, the whole millennial millions idea. That how much adjusted money would they have been getting from basically benefits? On paper, how many unfilled jobs would you have thought before this article were going on? Like how many open spaces did we have for laborers in America, would you assume?
Millions. I couldn't put a number. I couldn't tag it.
I have trouble when my brain can't comprehend above a certain number, but it's about 14 million. The numbers go up and down depending on which source you go to. So I took an average from our most trusted online sources we could find. Most of this is from AP News.
So 14 million for me. We always do it in cities. I'm thinking New York or Los Angeles area.
Okay, so I hit pause there and we just looked it up. New York is 8.4 million people as of 2019. So
add it to LA and then we're good, right?
Right. So
that puts it into perspective, right?
All of New York is 8.4 million. We're looking at 14 million unfilled jobs. And double New York for how many people who are unemployed currently. So we have 16 million people in America on unemployment right now. If I am, and we're not picking on anyone because we have political sides. Todd and I have both said multiple occasions we are apolitical. I will post my my independent party card at some point. But 16 million people are on unemployment right now. It sounds, if you are on Fox News or if you are Congressman Rooser, it sounds self-explanatory. We have 14 million unfilled jobs. We have 16 million people on unemployment. It sounds like a square peg has not been put in a square hole yet, and that the only thing keeping these people back from being slotted in to those 14 million unfilled positions is money. It's something is holding them back, and if you are Congressman Rooser, you think that something is a $300 check on your coffee table. Now, kind of the question we want to ask is the morality. Todd, is it, to your money, is it immoral to leave your flagging job where you might get hit by a car? Or is it immoral to walk out of Burger King if that $300 check is at home?
All I can go from is my personal experience on this. I worked when I had some tough times. I was between jobs, flirting with homelessness in my younger life. And I went to work for a temp service, and I got a job at the warehouse for the Dollar Tree. It was 10-hour shifts, nonstop stacking boxes. At the time, I was in very good physical shape. I could do it for about 3 or 4 days in a row without backache, spine problems, neck problems from bending over. It just wasn't sustainable. So I think of somebody working at Arby's. I think my Arby's down the street that I go to. I've talked to the manager there because there's these long lines and there's 2 people working in the store. She said, well, I'm supposed to have 14 people and there's 2 of us right now.
Right.
So I don't think people understand that it isn't about just clocking in and clocking out. The workload is just going to crush you. The stress and the customers bitching at you and then the cleanup and the corporate is just more than someone can take physically or mentally.
Right. I remember to share my own story. I worked in a loading dock when I was in my 20s, and it was loading trailers for a postage company. And they had the same model that basically everybody does. You take on a workload, and if you are, at the time I was very physically fit. I was really into weightlifting. I was really into boxing, more MMA than boxing, but it tore me up because they would have you do your workload. Like if you were loading a trailer an hour, they would give you another trailer. And if you could load that, they would give you another one. And so you were loading 3 trailers in an hour, literally 3 times the workload of somebody else. And if you slacked back from that because they knew you could handle it, they'd fire you. So you were doing 3 times the work of another person. You got the same pay, but it was they knew you could do more.
It's not fair. And even though you're doing the work, they don't pay you. So let's say it's $10 an hour. They don't pay you $30 an hour because you're doing
Right. And so you're talking about two people working at the dollar store where there used to be a crew of 14. Those two people aren't being paid to do two people's worth of work. They are expected to fill out that entire dollar store with their, spunk, verve, go get 'em, stick to itiveness, whatever you want to, BS terms you want to call it. They're being expected to pull up that slack and get the same amount of money.
And we talk about warehouse work, but think about it in a fast food restaurant where people are ordering off the dollar menu, specialty ordering off the dollar menu like it's a 5-star restaurant. And you have to sit there and smile
right.
when you literally have 7 more people's jobs to do.
Right. Todd and I did an entire episode on quitting, the Lee Iacocca episode. We are believers in quitting if you are not being sustained by something. A lot of the self-help genre talks about self-actualization, finding something that fulfills you, that we want to find something in life that will sustain us financially, that will make us work hard, because we do believe in hard work, but something that will help improve you as a person, that will be something good in your resume. Walking off of Burger King, I can't believe how many people are upset by this, that are like the congressman here, like Fox News. I can't believe how many people don't believe this is a good thing, that having somebody have the freedom to choose which garbage labor they want to do in life. I mean, that's the soul of competition, right?
Well, it's pushback accountability too. Like, it's going to if everyone steps up, things are going to change, right?
Right. So I think we've shown our hand already on this episode. At least I have. I can't
Apparently
hold
we're
in my
opinionated
ire.
on this.
Yeah. We're just going to go through the numbers. So I'm gonna start with just by saying, yes, on paper, the Republican news networks are currently correct. If there's 14 million unemployed, 60 million people on unemployment, that's a pretty clearly defined system there. Like you have so many slots, you have people who haven't filled those slots yet. But what we are having to sort of pretend is that those people wouldn't eventually find the right job for themselves given time. We are trying to rush them out the door to get into these jobs we want them doing, which is pumping gas and giving us burgers. We don't want to give them the time to find a temp job in the mailroom or to, find a job at the desk next to us. We want to rush them back into the labor force. So we want to talk a little bit about what would happen if people didn't have to rush back to work. We're going to get into some hippy-dippy nonsense here. Todd, you and I, before the episode started, we talked a little bit about automation. And this isn't far-fetched, by the way. Anyone listening to this, if you've been to McDonald's and you've seen those self-pay kiosks, the big bright screen that says, please order here, and you touch a bunch of screen that probably has who knows how many germs on it during COVID.
I always struggle with those. I think you have to be like a programmer at Microsoft to use those.
I always end up ordering the wrong things on those. I just press buttons until food comes to my mouth, and then I ask them to put it in for me.
And you're embarrassed to say that you don't know how to do it.
Right. They ask me, they're like, did you mean to order 17 McFlurries? I'm like, sure. We want to get to that. We, as a people, if you just look at the total scope of humanity, our goal should be to have unemployment. And this is going to, if you are a Teddy Roosevelt follower, if you believe in the strenuous life, if you believe in, work ethic and hard work and dedication, you're probably yelling at me right now that I'm a hippie. But our goal as humanity, when I talk about we want to switch from mops to Roombas, we really do, as a human race, our goal should be have robots, have machines that we have built do the work for us. Let us do the thinking. Let us do the work that is clerical work, that is creative work. That should be our goal, is to do the things that are happening right now. A kiosk replaces 2 people at the cashier's desk. That's a good thing in my book. We should let those people go home and slowly find a new job elsewhere that is fulfilling. I was wondering too, like when you think of hard work, like when you want to work hard in a day, what do you think that work should look like?
I think it's progress in that I solve some problems, put some things to bed, and then start on new projects. So real progress. How do you measure yours?
Words. I can see a stack of words on my prompt, and I can see that I did well in the day. But it kind of depends on what you're. I mean, if you flip burgers for a living, you can't pull up to a burger shack one day with your kids and point to it and be like, I built that mountain of burgers. Like, if you're in construction, you can at least look at a building and say, I built that.
Or you did the foundation or whatever you did that day. I guess in sales it is, which is I've been a lifelong salesperson. It's commissions and it's new relationships.
Right. Oh, that is something I hadn't thought of, but you're right. Like, if you work hard and you don't physically get something out of it, you at least have those connections, those relationships.
For later.
Yes. I am betting the networking opportunities for somebody flipping burgers is not that high. So to give a little bit of perspective, since 2000, so just 20 years ago, we've lost 5.6 million jobs to automation. So 1/3 of that number of unemployed people that we just talked about, if we have 14 million unfilled jobs, 16 million people on unemployment, almost 6 million jobs that were middle-class factory jobs have gone away in the last 20 years. So when you see those McDonald's kiosks, or you see a machine that is auto-loading, sewing fabric into a machine somewhere in a factory, or a spinning device that takes cheese off the Tillamook cheese wheel off the line and places it onto a belt. Those are all things that middle-class Americans were doing 20 years ago. And now those people are basically left doing 15-hour-a job Amazon box loading or flipping burgers for $9. So we're not... I mean, like, when you were younger, like when you were a teenager, did you associate flipping burgers with teenagers? Like, was that a teenager job?
Yeah, Fast Times at Richmond High, right? You work at the pizza place and then you go to college and then you get a real job.
Right. And when I go on Twitter, I still see that. Like people, especially my age or older, they still say it's a teenager job. They still sort of like, yeah, what are you doing that job? You're an adult, you have a family, go out and get a real job.
But where we live in Portland and most major cities, it's not uncommon at the fast food restaurants to see 80-90% Hispanic. And
right.
They're not 18, 19-year-olds. They're moms and dads, 30-somethings.
Yeah, that box loading job I talked about, none of them were teenagers. I mean, like, I think maybe a couple of them, but of a workforce 100 strong on Swan Island, almost all of them were adults. We talked about in our Amazon and wage theft episode that the model of getting people into a workplace for $15 an hour and benefits, that has become the economic model for businesses. That is the sweet spot to lock labor in and get them to stay begrudgingly and to work them until they reach a point of injury. We found out that Amazon factories were basically that some of them had the same injury rate as steel mills.
And when you work $15 an hour jobs, there's a lot of things that, that's people who are higher earners, more middle class, will not understand. They do a lot of work before they even clock in. An example for Amazon was it takes over 2 hours to get through security.
Right.
And to get to the lunchroom for a break is literally impossible in a 15-minute break.
Right. That is something we really wanted to talk about too, is anybody who thinks that people who don't do real work at these jobs, I don't just mean the labor. Like, if you think that your quote-unquote adult job, where you are at a desk processing people's orders, or you are doing data entry, or you are answering phones for a company, if you think that you are doing work that is worth more than somebody who is loading boxes or flipping burgers, one of you has something to show at the end of the day, and it's not the person processing orders or doing data entry. You can't point to a stack of papers and tell me, I did that. You'll never drive your kids past a sales building and be like, you see that building? I processed all of their orders for 10 years.
Well, the thing that bothers me personally is that the attitude, and it's from some of my good friends, they're not doing anything. They shouldn't make anything. I guarantee those same people that say that could not make it 1 week at Burger King on the line.
I completely agree. Undercover Boss has episodes pretty much to that. I think that the hidden secret of the American class system, if you ever work a job where you get above a certain income level, like once you get to the point where you are getting people to work together and that is your job, you realize how much more money you make just if you get to that platform. Like once you get to the point where you are helping teams get along and helping projects move along and you are getting the vision of a company out, that is where you realize that you are making more money than you probably deserve, just if we're talking about what you physically produce. You're not coming in with a harvest of wheat to feed people. You are coming back being able to say that I got a team to work together and shake hands. And that's kind of the dirty secret of being an American or just being a modern human.
Yeah, you read a few emails. What I call them in the sales business, we call it plain work.
Yes, plain work.
Get all dressed up and shave, and you go in. You do absolutely nothing.
And I say this as somebody who does absolutely nothing for a job. That is my job, is absolutely nothing. I get too much money for nothing, and I don't miss working in a box loading system.
And you do it all over again.
Right. We covered a Slate article once that was about why can't Americans get a raise? And this is the only time I've seen an article this heavy talk about the 90s recession and how so many companies got used to paying the 90s recession rates, the fear rate. It was, we can get away with $14 an hour, $15 an hour because you're too afraid to go anywhere else. You won't go to another company because, if we fire you, you are now in a labor crisis. So we've kind of gotten used to that model. Businesses got used to paying too little, and the rest of us just said, well, that's the economy for you, when in fact it was just corporations deciding they didn't need to pay more. Do you remember what pensions look like?
Well, being in my field and talking to different people, there used to be every job had a really good pension. And so that's why we always laugh when these police officers get in trouble or they quit because they're quitting their pension so much. It's more than they made working.
Right.
So it's like, oh, yeah, that was awfully brave of you. I quit.
Right.
But every profession used to have a pension, which means when you're done working, when you're retired, you've been there 30 years at the same job site, you get a gold watch, all this respect, and you also get almost close to what you're paying for the rest of your life.
Right.
But 401s came in and companies decided that pensions are just too damn expensive and we don't want to pay forever for these people, especially when they're living longer. So we're just going to put money in an account and they're going to put their own money in an account out of their paycheck and we're going to save trillions of dollars.
Right. And then Burger King can turn around and they're like, pensions are too much, 401ks are too much. We will just make it an option that we don't even have to match. Like a lot of these companies for contract work, They don't have to pay into a 401k. They don't even have to match what you pay into a 401k. They just simply get to use your labor, and then it's up to you to save whatever you can.
And that's not uncommon in other industries too, like the automobile industry or electricians or plumbers. They've gotten together and said, we've had enough. We're going to unionize. But do you know why they can't unionize in fast food business?
Why is that?
Because they're independently owned franchises. They can't get together. They don't have enough strength.
Okay.
And another problem, and I didn't read this is just what I think. I don't think they have the resources to pool up like these other professions do, blue collar or white collar.
I thought it was because they were unskilled labor. I always associated unions with like steel mills and welders and things like that. Anything with a hard hat. I did not think about that, they're not able to start a union because they're under contract, that they're being brought into a franchise.
Yeah, they work for a 3 rooftop franchise, so it's not like a national steel collaborate. What do you call it?
Conglomerate?
There.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about unions in World War II? I mean, like, people might think we're all over the map with this, that we're extrapolating from everywhere, but we're kind of getting into the history of why we basically built ourselves a labor crisis. Anyone who's like, this naturally formed, oh God, how are we losing all of our labor all at once? Who could have seen this happening? We built a middle class with World War II, after World War II, and then we took away all of the opportunities that we had. Would you be willing to sort of talk about FDR?
Just like corporation bailouts aren't a new thing. Like we talked about our Lee Iacocca quitting, he got a corporate bailout for Chrysler when he ran it up.
Right, for a whole company.
During World War II, one of our favorite presidents, FDR, he handed out civil project jobs. And I've read a lot about these. He'd hire people just to sweep the streets.
Right.
He just created weird-ass jobs like that.
Sweeping streets, building dams, paving roads.
Yeah, polishing the light fixtures. And he paid a lot of money just to get Americans working again, to get the economy moving again. And remember, he dragged us out of the Great Depression. Right.
And it, like we said, it fundamentally built the middle class, or at least set it up. So if hypothetically, if we were using his model and World War II history, did you ever hear about the no strike pledges?
No, I don't. What is that?
Okay, so in World War II, the U.S. government was trying to avoid basically what we have now, where like groups of laborers would just like walk off a job because the company they were working with just wouldn't pay them more, or wouldn't fix the AC in the case of Burger King. So the U.S. government had a system where they offered to arbitrate for union leaders and labor groups. So they arbitrate, meaning they would come in and they would be like, hey, we're the U.S. government. Let us negotiate with your boss. And they would do that. They would send in arbitrators. The government would be like, how about you pay these people a little bit more? It was never a huge amount. Like, if you're thinking this led to the government being unfair and heavy-handed and getting laborers, 10 times what their labor is worth, it was actually under inflation. The U.S. government would come in, they'd get them 20 more cents or on the dollar or whatever. It was below the inflation rate, but it was something.
But it was huge. It's probably huge national industries that we needed to fuel the whole national economy.
Oh, absolutely. Mine workers. A lot of these I was reading about, mine workers. But they would only do this if they agreed not to strike. So the no strike pledge was, we will help negotiate for a higher wage, but you can't go on strike and you can't stop the flow of coal. What Burger King has done is, because all of these franchises aren't under an umbrella, because they don't have a union, they have made it impossible for the government to help. So, like, a small group in a single Burger King all walk out at once, the government can't come in and be like, okay, you guys have a central leadership, a union, ability to bargain. They're like, no, this is just a gang, basically, leaving all at once. So they can't arbitrate that.
Since we're coming in and out of the pandemic right now, the reason it's such a sensitive area is because all of restaurants' business, which you wouldn't think, has absolutely boomed. And we're standing in longer lines. These are essential employees, essential businesses. They're at high risk of being exposed to thousands of people every day. And they're the least protected, not just health-wise, but business-wise, pay-wise.
Right. We call these people essential workers during the pandemic, and we kind of deem them as essential as, like, say, coal mine workers during World War II. And yet here we are. I mean, we're watching them walk off the job and we're shaking our heads, but they have far less representation than those coal workers. So it's like, yeah, what else do we expect?
And you don't have to be in a fast food restaurant right now for more than 5 minutes to say these people are all doing more than $15 an hour worth of work.
Right. Have you ever I'm gonna hearken to internet memes here. Have you seen the memes that badmouth the idea of a $15 minimum wage?
I'm looking at one right now.
We're looking
splattered cheese on the outside of a filet of fish.
Right. There are a huge sect of Twitter where they're like, the idea of somebody flipping a burger getting $15 an hour is insulting. But if you look at this burger, it's got cheese thrown on the side, and the caption is, "Do they really think they deserve $15 an hour?"
See, I think these same jerks that say things like this, Joe, they would say the same thing about $4.25 an hour.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the amount is. They just want to.
People nowadays don't want to work. These kids don't know how to work.
Right. Part of me thinks that people that post these memes are trying to denigrate or deride the work of fast food industry workers. Now that I've read, like, we covered the Easterlin Paradox in an episode. Now that we've read a bit about that, I'm starting to really lean into it. Just to be very brief, the Easterlin Paradox we talked about was a study that showed people would rather make less money in life as long as their neighbors made less than them. So you choose a worse school for your kids, a worse place to live, and you choose lower income as long as your neighbors made half as much as you did. So if you're the big fish in the small pond, people were more likely to pick that than to be the small fish in the big pond, where they made more money. They made, the comparison was 50K to 100K. People chose the 50K over the 100K as long as the people around them didn't make more. So the whole argument about minimum wage, and this Easterlin Paradox is totally held up by modern polls done by fairly neutral sources. They've done polls where they look at how many people are voting for keeping minimum wage low. Almost without exception, the people voting to keep minimum wage low are people themselves who make just barely over minimum wage. They don't want to see that tide rise under them because it would mean that they make less by comparison. If I make $16 an hour and I feel good about that and I feel like, hey, I made it in life, I am making middle class, middle American money. If I see that tide under me come up to $15 an hour, I will feel worse about myself.
A lot of our listeners are academics. It's educational. It was self-improvement, but it's been switched to educational podcast.
I don't know how that happened.
By the masses, by our listeners. So I think a fair thing, and a lot of people would ask, and I want to hear what your take on it is, Joe. What about the old, you start out at $15 an hour, $9 an hour, whatever, but you apply yourself. You work after work. You take classes. And then you rise above it. You become the manager, then the general manager, then the district manager. What do you think about that?
The bootstrapping theory.
Did I sound sarcastic there, or did I sound even?
No, I think that you captured it, and that is sort of the feel of America. That is what we all want to believe in,
and that's what our own narrative was, right? I had nothing.
Absolutely,
I started from the mailroom.
I mean, like, literally, you and I have been talking on this podcast about how you and I both worked shit labor jobs. Like, we're talking about moving boxes in our teens. No, there is a lot to say for that. But there is also a economic movement map, or a poverty map. If you're ever wondering if the American dream, if you can actually bootstrap the way Todd is talking about, that you can pull yourself up to, all the way from the lowest tax bracket to the highest. Well, that's a study that exists. You can look it up, and you can look it up city by city. It's very easy to find. We'll try to link it into our episodes if I remember to include it. But what it effectively tracks is, if you are in county by county, city by city, if you are in Jacksonville, Florida, I believe their percentage was something like 3 or 4% of people can make it from the lowest tax bracket to the highest in their lifetime. We in the Pacific Northwest are closer to 10%. So to give you some context for that, if you are in some of the southern states in a city that has a very low mobility rate, you might as well live in a closed-off caste system in India. Your chances of bootstrapping yourself, of taking night classes and working your way out of poverty and working all the way up the chain, are less than like 4%. It's you should just live in a system like classism couldn't be more heavily embedded in your DNA. Whereas there are some cities in America where it's higher than 10%, and you're fine. Like you can live that American dream. You can bootstrap your way. The idea that the American dream is open to everyone, that's nonsense. Like, that's any historian or economist will tell you that the American dream isn't open to everybody. A lot of it comes down to where you live and what your opportunities are.
And of that 90%, let's say, because we're in Portland and we're in the West Coast, a thriving economy, of the 90% that don't make it, it doesn't mean that they're lazy. They just didn't have the chances, the breaks, or they had life happen with family illness, personal illness.
I'm very glad you said that. The subject of today, Rachel Flores, we didn't cover it in our article, but it talked in Vice that she had a kid and she had a sick family member. Dependency ratio is a very real thing in economics. So if you have a lot of people you're taking care of, you are not going to be able to put as much money into night school, per se. So we have trudged all over the idea of, the $300 stimulus check at home, $300 a week keeping people at home. But I want to cover one last article, if you're willing, to sort of back us up on this.
I promise not to go any more rants.
Okay. Don't worry. I'll take over from there. I've ranted enough for both of us already. This is from Esther Duflo, who is an MIT professor, youngest person ever to receive a Nobel Prize for economy. And she says she doesn't think that the stimulus package is keeping people from finding jobs. She says, on the road to economic recovery, she says, quote, "Gender inequality, unequal access to childcare, return to in-person work mandates, and vaccine access are among the many pressing issues surrounding return to work in the United States." So basically she's saying that the stimulus gives us a buffer, that sweet $300 a week. It is not a windfall. It is not winning the lottery, but it is giving people a precious few breaths of air to take their time and find a job that actually fits them, Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what job fits me best? Burger King. Have you heard about the states that are cutting their safety nets? The ones that are getting rid of the checks?
Yeah, I was like, I heard there's a group of them.
It's up to 22 states, and that's according to ZipRecruiter. Amazon is paying huge bonuses, and 22 states are cutting the payments, but there are 9 states that are offering return to work bonuses. If Oregon waved $1,000 check in front of you to get back out there and return to your job, would you do it?
That'll go awfully fast. That's not even 1 month of rent, but would you?
Well, let me change the question slightly. If I gave you $1,000, would you go to a job that you didn't know how to do or was like outside of your skill set?
No, because I know it would fail.
Or just be miserable. Like, for me, that's a payment. I mean, like, Amazon is offering the same amount of money for people to come work for them as like the intro money, like the bonus. If states are doing the exact same thing, I mean, that almost feels like the states are pulling the same trick that the corporations are to try to get people into jobs that don't suit them.
And that's not sustainable, or work they're not cut out for,
right?
Or they can't physically do. You know, you could take as many middle-aged men as you want and go make them work at that Dollar Tree place I worked when I was in the 20s. They couldn't do it for more than a half a week.
Right. And I'm betting that some of these intro bonuses, the starting bonus, I bet they're only available if they're there for more than a week.
They've got the golden carrot. They're a year out. They get it back from you, I promise, 10 times over.
Oh, absolutely. And I really do believe that those bonuses are just a way of keeping the base wage low. That it's they would rather give a bonus than to raise the base pay. Did you hear about Jimmy John's being sued because they were using non-compete clauses?
You're kidding me. So if I'm at Jimmy John's and I'm a delivery driver there, I can't go work at Subway?
It was for their sandwich makers. And yes, that's absolutely
tuna fish
right.
Sandwiches. And is there?
Their
sandwiches aren't that fucking good.
Yeah, our artisanal sandwiches deserve a non-compete clause. For anyone who hasn't heard of a non-compete clause, it's usually used for like creative work and skilled labor. The idea is that if I am writing advertisements, like this is Mad Men, if I'm writing ads for our company, Lemens and Anthony, I can't go over to the company across the street and write the same kind of ads. Like I can't I can't copy our advertisements or whatever. Jimmy John's used this system. Like anyone who walked in to make sandwiches for them, for $10 an hour, they made them sign a non-compete clause. So like if you wanted to work at not just Subway, if you wanted to work at like a deli in Fred Meyer, you would be competing with Jimmy John's, and you couldn't do that.
Can't you just see some high school kid meeting up with this mafia guy and saying, I got the goods? It's the ham and cheese sandwich.
Open your coat. It's lunch meat.
It's so ridiculous.
It's locking labor into your company.
So then you can have a boss that's a total psychopath. Your skill set is just in, food preparation stuff, and now you're limited to where you can work in your own area.
Right. Yeah. The notion that so the dream of capitalism is that if I am in a job that isn't good, like the job sucks, I can go to a competitor. Competition is the soul of capitalism. So if I say, Todd, you suck as a manager, you can take this job and shove it, I can walk out and work somewhere else.
But that is how you get ahead. You go there, you're the best, fastest sandwich maker. You pay attention to what your manager does, And then you go to Subway and you say, listen, I'm prepared. I've got the experience. I know how to work. I know what to do. I'll be your assistant manager. And you work your way up that way.
Right. Yeah. If you're not going to pay me more, I can take my skills elsewhere. They will pay me what I'm worth. McDonald's, Burger King, and Jimmy John's have had non-compete clauses. Sorry, correction. Jimmy John's, McDonald's, Carl's Jr., and Amazon have all made their people sign non-compete clauses.
Who the hell's competing with Amazon, right?
If you see somebody folding a box across the street and you're like, hey, I've got that skill. You go across the street, you say, pay me more than $15 an hour. And then Amazon taps you on the shoulder and says, sorry, bud, you belong to us.
Indentured servant. Now, another wage theft that takes place in the lower paying jobs and the middle and the higher paid wages, contractors, Joe. Do you know that much about contract jobs?
Contractors as in the person that puts in my pool?
No, contractors as in they're hired by an outside agency and they'll be hired for a big corporation. And then they'll be given no benefits. They're paid just like 1099. And they're giving a lot of responsibilities so that they get everything delegated to them from the parent company.
Oh, that's how Uber doesn't pay a minimum wage, because everybody is their own contractor.
So you can make as little as $3 an hour.
Right.
And then jobs that pay higher, even middle class jobs, you might do a job that should pay about $120,000 with full benefits, 401, and you'll be doing the job for $65K. So that's another form of wage theft.
And so our Burger King employees, they were all contractors. They're not actual Burger King people.
In the fast food, they usually work for the franchise, so they are employees.
Okay.
But on that point, in the narrative, we talked about Wendys. And Wendys pays a wage of $9 an hour over the whole country. Now that's $1,548 a month. So then you pay taxes on that. It's $1,161. So every 2 weeks, you make $580. You have no retirement. You have no health benefits. And you get a discount on your food every day. What can you do with $580 a week, Joe? Can you raise a family? Can you have your own place? Can you have a car? I don't think you can do any of those things.
Let's put it into a slightly. I want to put this into perspective for one of your earlier points. If you have $580 a week, even if you have no other obligations, can you afford every 2 weeks, yeah. $300 a week? Can you afford night classes? Either the time or the money to take night classes to better yourself?
You couldn't afford the books.
Right.
You couldn't afford the bus fare to get there.
Anyone who thinks that this is doable, go back and listen to our college degrees episode. We talk about how much money it costs to go to school, even for like the trade schools and the cheaper schools. We cover that.
And if you're rolling your eyes, just go pull up your Wells Fargo Chase account and look what your withdrawals were this week. In May, President Biden announced the following. We're going to make it clear that anyone collecting unemployment who is offered a suitable job must take the job or lose their unemployment. So what's a suitable job for an adult in America? An adult who can't get a salaried office gig. For years, we've looked down on burger flippers. People on Twitter still insist that if you're behind the burger grill or a cash register, then you're an adult working a teenager's job. And you don't deserve a livable wage. So Rachel Flores just took the advice of every condescending American on Twitter. She quit her job and is now holding out for that all-important adult job. You know, the kind of adult jobs factories used to offer. We like to think the economy is a simple system. Just push on one side of the scale and the other side goes up. You offer people $300 a week to survive, and they'll be $300 a week less incentivized to work. But Americans aren't stupid. Nobody thinks the COVID relief payments are permanent, nor is it a livable wage by any stretch. Rachel Flores and her team didn't walk out of Burger King thinking they had a sweet $300 check waiting for them at home. They walked out because they knew if they get sick, there's no tomorrow for them. Burger King cared so little about their health that they couldn't be bothered to fix the damn air conditioner in the kitchen. The one place in the restaurant necessary to run a restaurant. Can you imagine trying to find an employer who calls you babies for suffering dehydration when the stakes are even higher? What if you're not asking for air? What if you're asking for coverage after catching COVID? Because half of the customers aren't vaccinated. Americans aren't becoming fed up because they're lazy and $300 a week is a fortune. We've been fed up for a long time. And this happens to be the golden moment for wage workers. While employers are desperate to send them a message, we quit. Because despite not having other qualifications, a job at Burger King isn't worth dying for, which is exactly what we've been asking them to do. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We appreciate feedback, we love spirited debates, and we very much encourage you to look at our sources and look at our links. Because if it sounds like we got political this episode, please just follow our research and check out the sources we got it from.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.